Welcome to the Humanist Freedoms podcast by Humanist Heritage Canada. We share stories and perspectives from Canada's ongoing humanist heritage. You can find us online at www.humanistfreedoms.com or www.humanistheritagecanada.ca, where you may find the Humanist Freedoms news blog. We share news, information, and stories about what we call contemporary applied humanism. It's humanism in action. Humanist Heritage Canada is our new initiative to document and share the stories of Canada's rich humanist heritage. Practical conclusions. We have faced the realities of our world honestly and bravely, and we have come to terms with the fact that everything that is born must also die. There is no immortality in this universe. This is true of all creatures and all organisms, including humans and the complex civilizations they create and become part of. We are currently living through the dying phase of Western culture. Is there anything we can do about this regrettable state of affairs? The answer is yes and no. Once any creature, any individual, or any civilization is born, it must die sooner or later, no exceptions. But yes, we can conduct ourselves, so can a culture, in a way that postpones the inevitable death, and that makes the life that takes us there more joyous and more creative. In the case of individuals, it is easy to see how to achieve that. Eat healthy food, balance exercise and rest to keep your body strong, avoid excesses of any kind, and enter into partnerships with friends who share your commitment to a life of peace, happiness, and care. Any manual of healthy living will give you the basics, and with a little effort you can expand on them, adapt them to your personality, and find out what you must do to enjoy a long and happy life, barring unforeseen sicknesses or accidents. Living by these common sense insights is a measure of every individual's intelligence and strength of character. Civilizations, as we have seen, are organic entities and therefore subject to the same cyclical processes from birth to death, and these are also equally influenced by the behavior of its members. Where are the manuals to tell us how to conduct ourselves to create healthy and happy cultures? Well, there are scores of them. Every religion subscribes to one. The Bible, the Quran, the Dhammapada, the Torah, the Bhagavad Gita, to name just a few such manuals. All political parties tout one too: communism, socialism, fascism, liberalism, conservatism, etc. All of these religious and political manuals include constructive items, but as complete doctrines, all of them have failed because those who have professed to believe in them base their actions instead on egotistical and vainglorious objectives. That is why their ethical stances have promised us paradise, but have delivered only dissension, confrontation, quarrels, and war. Let us try, without prejudice, to name a few ethical practices that are fundamental and necessary if we are to enjoy the most desirable gifts life has to offer. Number 1. Peace. We must absolutely and without exceptions commit to a world without violence and war. If we don't, our glorious skill in creating devastating nuclear weaponry alone will guarantee that the next world war will end the story of humanity on this planet. It would seem self-evident that a world without violence and war would be more enjoyable for all, and therefore everyone would go for it. But is not as easy as it sounds. For one thing, it means going against the edicts of Mother Nature, who runs a world which, in the British philosopher Thomas Hobbes' words, exists in a state of bellum omnium contra omnes, the war of everybody against everybody. In other words, in nature, the strongest and most brutal survive. The alpha male rules the tribe. He can rely on the necessary supply of food and on access to females to reproduce. The strongest emerge from a perpetual physical competition, mostly amongst the males. This means that human males are by nature prone to settle all issues by physical belligerence. That's why in thousands of years of preaching peace, the religions have failed to bring peace to the world. They might have done better if they had empowered women to run all affairs of state. But the name of the murderess Giselle de Blanco, USA, pops up to remind us that we can't rely on women either. Instead, we must all of us, men and women, commit without compromise to subduing the brute inside us and Instead, we must all of us, men and women, commit, without compromise, to subduing the brute inside us and to establish peace and practice nonviolence. That means to refuse military service under any circumstances and never to use a gun to shoot a human being, or any living creature, some would argue. It is the only path for humanity into the future. The Doukhobors are an admirable example of a community that has traveled that path for a few centuries, and their experience can inspire us. They originated in Russia in the 17th century as a group that split from the Orthodox Church. They rejected the Orthodox Christian teachings, including the Bible and the rule of the Church, and they refused to participate in warfare because they saw the divine spirit alive in every human being. They decided they would never kill another human being. To avoid a temptation, they publicly burnt their weapons on June 28, 1895, and refused military service. They were, of course, promptly persecuted. Their reaction was to refuse to swear the oath of loyalty to Tsar Nicholas II. To escape the subsequent cruel oppression, 7,500 Doukhobors emigrated to Canada. Leon Tolstoy, who felt a spiritual kinship with them, financed their journey to the prairie provinces where they are still active as successful farmers and still loyal to their commitment to peace and against violence today. In Canada, too, they were persecuted for their pacifism, but they have remained faithful to their convictions and we can learn from them. It also means putting the current war in its proper perspective. As my good friend Kuzma J. Tassarov, the Doukhobor writer and activist who has spent his life in search of truth and non-killing society, remarked when he read this passage, the West has been at war with Russia for over 200 years, and the current war is really the West, led by USA and NATO, against Russia with the purpose of breaking up the Russian Federation and wiping out Russia once and for all, then settling it with proper Anglo-Saxon people and creating many new millionaires. We would do well to follow the Doukhobor example and adopt their refusal to use arms, especially when it comes to nuclear arms. All countries must destroy their nuclear weapons right now, all of them. Otherwise, there will be no future for humanity. The current warfare between Russia and Ukraine shows how close we are to self-destruction. 2. The Doukhobors prove that Hobbes overlooked some other, more constructive forces which are active in us and in nature generally. Just observe any creature raising its children and you get a powerful lesson in cooperation, care, compassion, and love. And that takes us to our next level of ethical codes. It is just as important to know what to do as what not to do if we want our world to survive. This would seem to be self-evident, but nature has designed us for hierarchical behavior. We struggle to be superior to our neighbors, make more money, live in a bigger house, wear more expensive clothes, drive a better car, go on more luxurious holidays, enjoy a more imperative reputation, etc. Sports is perhaps the most common arena for the establishment of superiority. Thousands of people attend sports events, the sole purpose of which is to exhibit competitions that produce winners and losers. The winners, both as teams and as individuals, are celebrated massively and often become global heroes. When this is usually the reward for knocking a piece of plastic into a net or some equivalent feat, you realize the crowds are not applauding some brilliant accomplishment, but they're acting out the primitive competition dynamics nature has embedded in our hearts, just like the enthusiasm for war. While a game of soccer is in every respect preferable to war, it nevertheless reinforces the barbarian spirit of rivalry, as is so often demonstrated at the end of a ball game when violence breaks out among the fans, usually started by the supporters of the losing team. The consequence is a society that is structured and operates in social classes. The ones at the bottom, being the losers, are condemned to a poor and to suffer, while the winners rise to the top and luxuriate in wealth and privilege. But humanity has now evolved beyond this barbarian level of social dictatorship. We must commit to and create, not merely proclaim, a society of equals. The basics of life must become accessible to everyone: food, housing, education, and medical services. Cuba, with Fidel Castro as president, has come closest to this ideal despite the vicious attempts of the USA to stop him, including complete isolation of the island and several attempts to murder Castro. Events in Cuba over the past 50 years offer powerful insights into both the problems and glories of a truly democratic society. The Cuban experience wasn't perfect because humans can never be perfect, but Castro's socialism served the people of Cuba well. It also proved to be beneficial to many other needy countries, in South America primarily, because Cuba sent many a unit of professionals, medical doctors primarily, to assist them, without profit or benefit to themselves. Castro thought of the Cuban Revolution not as a revolution of millionaires. Instead, he explained, it is one carried out by the poor, and is one which dreams of ensuring the well-being not only of our own poor, but rather of all the poor in the world. That is a viable road into the future, and we would do well to incorporate his lessons into whatever post-capitalist society we decide to create. What about dismissing all soldiers and armies and creating in their place a peace corps that would help out fellow countries in need, but without weapons or money? The current Canadian Conservation Corps is a step in the right direction, but it should be created by government and aim to help out internationally beyond Canada's wildlife concerns. 3. If the human species is to survive on this planet, it can only be as a democratic society of equals that practices care, cooperation, compassion, and love. These are the glorious virtues which we have honored more in words than in actions. We all know that they are essential to our survival, and we all know people who act accordingly at times. But as a species, we have betrayed the best we are capable of. Care means helping fellow humans in difficulties. Cooperation means to join a group engaged in a positive project. Compassion is the acknowledgement that we are all in the same boat on a glorious ride that comes with lots of pain and suffering that no one can escape. Love is the ultimate emotion that celebrates another fellow being as one's equal, one with whom one wants to share the joys and sorrows of life. It combines admiration with respect and passion, wishing him or her all the happiness and glory of self-fulfillment life can offer. I lay no claim to originality with my plea for a democratic society of equals whose basic needs are satisfied by the community. But I insist, unless we turn these words into concrete practice in our daily lives, we are doomed to become the victims of our ignorance, our selfishness, and our most primitive cravings. The good news is that today we are seeing a noticeable increase in compassion and care globally when human beings are in distress. Though it seems to be accompanied by an equal intensification of violence around the world, I see it as a promising sign that more and more people realize what they owe their humanity and what a viable road into the future looks like. Another feature of the human world is its obsession with more. It amounts to a disease I would call moreism, an obsession for more of everything we like. More cars, more highways, more furniture, more clothes, more dishes, more money, more travel. You name it, we like it. We want more of it. It is a glorious hedonistic orgy promoted and nurtured as a consumer society by the capitalists who profit from it. But it is also a sure road to catastrophe for the rest of us. Already we have far exceeded the capacity of planet Earth to sustain the levels of food, energy, water, and living space on which we depend for our survival. And the excessive amounts of carbon dioxide we have put into the atmosphere in the process of indulging our profligacy, as well as the greenhouse gases, such as methane, nature adds in response to our recklessness, have resulted in a climate change that has now begun to devastate our towns, our forests, and our agricultural lands. At the time of writing, at the end of 2022, it is clear that environmental catastrophes are rapidly increasing in intensity and severity, viz. the Floods in Pakistan, Brazil, and Iran, wildfires in Australia, France, and Spain, hurricanes in Cuba, California, and Africa, to name a few. This is clearly the beginning of a breakdown of our ecosystem, a process that is now self-perpetuating and can no longer be stopped by anything we do. Only if we exercise the most rigorous restraint in our reckless pursuit of pleasure can we hope to stop the current catastrophe from making this planet uninhabitable. Only if every one of us revolts against the consumer society and participates in reducing our demands in every area of consumption significantly does our species have a future on planet Earth. When the climate returns to its productive seasons, this means that we learn to act with modesty, exercising lessism in place of moreism. 5. If humanity is to return to the path that enables us to enjoy and participate in the beautiful, marvelous, and glorious spectacles and events that nature so generously offers us from day to day, there is at least one other huge problem we have to address, what the experts call the population explosion. William R. Catton Jr., in his eye-opening study Overshoot, published by the University of Illinois Press in 1980, demonstrates graphically that the human population has grown beyond the carrying capacity of our planet. He sees the situation as so disastrous that only revolutionary change can reduce the human dominance over the world ecosystem and prevent us from self-destruction. Almost half a century has passed, and apart from the problematic effort in China, we have done nothing to deal with what is clearly a looming catastrophe. On the contrary, in 1980, the world population was around 4.5 billion. Since then, it has grown to 8 billion, and it continues to grow by over 80 million a year. Many of the horrors that result from overshoot has already descended on us because, as some experts argue, our planet can sustain not even half of our current population. There is considerable debate on the topic, but the facts speak for themselves. There is massive famine in Asia and Africa. Climate change is impacting food supplies catastrophically. Poverty is still spreading around the globe as more than 1 billion people must struggle to live on less than $1.25 a day. 1 million people die each year from water-related diseases as drinking water is becoming scarcer, etc., etc. The question, of course, is what we can reasonably do to save ourselves. Another world war would almost certainly solve the problem. But global destruction is hardly a viable solution because it would exterminate the very species that can most liberally enjoy the glory of being alive. Another significant population decrease might be caused by a major epidemic, not the comparatively minor COVID-19 pandemic, but one comparable to the bubonic plague in the 14th century, often referred to as the Black Death, which killed around half the population of Europe. We would not, of course, wish such a catastrophe upon humanity, but Mother Nature has her own compromising way of reacting to environmental irregularities. Put too much carbon in the air, for instance, and she'll burn down your forests, thereby compounding the problem by augmenting climate change. It would obviously be preferable if we could reduce the size of the human population on Earth in some sensible way ourselves. China tried in 1979 by enacting a one-child per family law across the nation. It was a well-meaning effort that reduced the world population by 400 million humans while it lasted, but it created such problems that it was cancelled by 2016. Apart from significantly reducing the new generation of workers, it unbalanced the numbers of male and female births. Too many families opted for a son rather than a daughter when they were restricted to one child. The result is that millions of Chinese men cannot find a Chinese wife. Furthermore, because many families wanted a son, not a daughter, but were not prepared to kill her upon birth, they raised the daughter illegally by not registering her. When I was in China in the 1990s, I was told there were millions of young girls who had no official status in the country because their births went officially unrecognized. In other words, these girls do not officially exist in China. I hate to contemplate what might have happened to them. Evidently, the problem of the population explosion cannot and should not be solved by government decree. Like everything we have to do to put our world in order, the decisions must be made freely by conviction and insights on the part of the majority of the members of our species. You cannot legislate compassion, care, honesty, kindness, generosity, modesty, lessism, peace, or love in the individual, but without these virtues taking deep root in our hearts and minds, soon the glorious story of our species on this planet will end in catastrophe. By the time these virtues are forced upon us by nature, it will be too late to save ourselves. May these deliberations contribute to our changing the direction of our journey away from the abyss toward which we are rushing, and find a calm, peaceful, and sensible road to creative fulfillment. Should you wish to obtain a copy of Henry Beissel's Catastrophic Glory, you can inquire at humanistfreedoms@gmail.com, and we'll be happy to pass your inquiry along. Welcome to the Humanist Freedoms podcast by Humanist Heritage Canada. We share stories and perspectives from Canada's ongoing humanist heritage. You can find us online at www.humanistfreedoms.com or www.humanistheritagecanada.ca, where you may find the Humanist Freedoms news blog. We share news, information, and stories about what we call contemporary applied humanism. It's humanism in action. Humanist Heritage Canada is our new initiative to document and share the stories of Canada's rich humanist heritage.